talking about the newly elected Tonse Alliance chairperson and presidential candidate in the name of Honorable Brand Mundubile, who is also Mporokoso member of parliament. Honorable Mundubile, welcome to State of the Nation and congratulations on your election.
Thank you. Thank you very much, PK. It's indeed a pleasure to be here tonight to look at the many things affecting the nation, and in particular, opposition unity.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Before we get to discussing opposition unity, I'd like first of all to reflect on some of the events of today, chiefly a press conference that was convened by the Patriotic Front National Chairperson, I would like to believe, Honorable Jean Kapata, who says the party considers you to have expelled yourself for attending the Tonse General Assembly. What has been your immediate reaction to this particular position? We get it out of the way, then we go into substantive matters.
You see, PK, I've been observing and listening to most of the discourse around Honorable Brand Mundubile and Tonse. Sometimes it's very difficult to comment or indeed exercise one's mind around that. For one reason, PK, the Tonse, that I now lead as president is the same Tonse to which President Edgar Chagalungu appointed me almost a year ago as the national chairperson for parliamentary affairs and deputized by President Chifum Panda State Council. It's the same Tonse where the Apostle Professor Dan Pule was as vice chairperson. Yeah, so when somebody says because you are there, you've expelled yourself, you begin to wonder at which point. Was it at the point that President Lungu appointed me to that particular alliance, or something else has changed? Yeah, so I think that sometimes it's very difficult to comment on some of these things because the Zambian people are watching. There's definitely more that the people expect from us as leaders. There's more that is expected of us. So even as we go out there to make comments, have press briefings, sometimes we should take a step back and think about the Zambian people.
Right.
What are the expectations? Is this really what they want to hear? You ask yourself one question. How many times will opposition leaders appear in public, fight in public, reconcile one fight after the other, one negative statement after the other? In the meantime, PK, the farmers are dying on queues, waiting for their money. Youths are being driven out of their spaces by the army. Okay, the civil servants are working under very difficult conditions. So at which point will politicians abandon their selfish interests, their heads, and tend to serve the people? Right. So if you ask me, PK, as to what were my comments, I'll be very honest with you, I really didn't exercise my mind to that. I think that our resolve now, as Tonse, our resolve is to find solutions to the many challenges the youths are facing today. So these are competing interests. I ask myself, what should I be doing now? Should I look at this video? Should I watch the video where my dear sisters were having a press briefing so that I prepare my response, so I exercise my thoughts around it? Or should I think about the youths that are suffering? So I'm being very honest. I didn't have any thoughts around that. I just watched and I said, well, I think Zambians are there to judge.
I mean, when I look at you and observe you, I look at the people that surround you, the colleagues within your party, and perhaps even extended civil society organizations that might have an affinity towards yourself and the larger opposition, family. Do you still, feel that such sentiments coming from a party that should be uniting could be coming perhaps not at the right time? And how are the people who are gravitating towards you, are part of the same family, feel when they hear such sentiments? What are your feelers from the colleagues that you are surrounded with, who are from the same family?
Yes, people are indeed worried, especially civil society organizations and other political parties. They believe, as a party that was in government not many years ago, we are supposed to occupy a central place in providing that unity. And some of the people that you refer to, PK, are senior members of that party. They are also senior members of, they were senior members of government, as it were. It's expected that at this point, they should be there to provide leadership. You hear, the same voices saying, we need to unite. It's the same voices that are very quick, to pronounce division, to show hate towards others, as it were. Yeah, so my advice and guidance to my sisters and indeed other leaders would be that we need to be very careful. We need to now understand and read the mood outside.
Right.
What are the expectations of the Zambian people? What do they expect of us? And that certain statements should not be made at all in public. There are certain things that you say in private.
Right.
You can reprimand people privately. The matters that are discussed now, whether it's Tonse, whether matters relating to PF, are matters that Zambians have followed very closely the past 4 years. So they have a fair understanding of what is going on. So it's not so much about what one leader says today. It's so much about how much more do Zambians know about this particular subject, and how are they judging us as we go out there to make these statements.
When we go back to our central theme for this discussion tonight, opposition unity ahead of the 2026 August general elections, there's a saying that to whom much is given, much is required. And it would appear then that since the mantle seems to have fallen perhaps on your shoulders, there's a lot of leadership expected from you and your team in the context of galvanizing unity. I think it would be in the interest of the Zambian people to know what would be your strategy to make sure that there is cohesion within the political landscape, and that everyone begins to see that Zambia is bigger than perhaps personal interests that are being fronted from different sections.
Yes, PK. We've actually started engaging. As Tonse, we've started engaging other political parties. This is not a new thing. When Tonse was created, just by way of background, President Lungu's view was that being the biggest opposition political party, whose illegal status was hanging.
Yes.
We needed to come together with other opposition political parties,
Right.
taking advantage of the structures, our structures right across the country, as it were. And you see, PK, most of the political parties admitted to this one fact, that you are the largest opposition political party.
Right.
During the time of contestation and differences, most of these parties have been coming round to talk to us individually and say, why don't you quickly resolve your wrangles so that we can come together? So after yesterday's event, I want to tell you that there's been a number of phone calls with the people that we had engaged with previously. So what you're going to see a number of political parties coming to work with us in Tonse to unite the opposition.
Right.
So it's not a new subject that we're talking about.
Yeah.
What many were waiting for, they were waiting for PF to provide leadership within Tonse, first of all, and then Tonse will begin to attract other political parties.
Right.
So now that we are done with our Congress,
Yeah.
the leadership has been chosen, These political parties are now coming round. We already have started engagements. I'll tell you now that I have scheduled meetings right through the weekend.
Right.
So you begin to see parties coming together to work with us.
Talking about the General Congress that you held, I must confess it took most of us by surprise. We were not expecting it. We had read your announcement of postponement. Was that very strategic, or it was an afterthought? What really happened? Was it a rushed process? Could you just perhaps walk us through? Now that is after the fact. It would be good to just get some insight into what went behind the curtains to plan such an excellent execution.
Well, to start with, PK, we've always said that the democratic space in our country is totally diminished. We have a government that gets very excited at the mention of any political activity in the opposition. In this particular case, once the announcement was made to say we're going for a congress on a particular date, we began to hear some feelers. People were getting excited with court papers with a view of obtaining an injunction. Obviously, that worried the organizers of this particular event. And also, we had election campaigns going on in Kasama. Yeah, so really, it got everybody worried, knowing very well that from the experience that we have with the PF, where a simple injunction is taking months, as it were. So I think the organizers were very active. They were alert, ensure that they organized meetings where the Council of Leaders agreed to abridge the time in case what we're hearing was true. And it was agreed by the Council of Leaders that we could actually have the Congress earlier than stated. So once that was agreed and the delegates were prepared, the Congress was held yesterday. By the way, it was very successful. It was very transparent, democratic, and every delegate who attended, I think, was very happy at the end of the day. What was very notable was the spirit of camaraderie and fellowship amongst the delegates, supporting the competing candidates. The air of peace and friendship and love is what prevailed. And that was because those of us that were competing set the tone. I want my colleagues, including my sisters, to just maybe pick a leaf and understand that it is possible to compete and yet not be enemies. It is possible to have divergent views and yet maintain love and peace amongst ourselves. So what was demonstrated between Apostle Pule and myself, we hugged before the event, we hugged after the event, and our supporters were basically living in harmony. So it is possible. It is possible. I'm really hoping that people pick a leaf from there and understand that you can actually transact very peacefully in this political space.
If you were to speak and reflect and extrapolate what happened last night to the rest of the structures across the country, and I'm not talking about your association with other political parties, which you have already, alluded to, that they are phone calls. But if someone sitting in Chinsali, in Lubwa, where I come from, and they are wondering what must this mean to the PF structures when they mirror it against the events of last night, what would be your message to the structures of the Patriotic Front across the country?
Yes, Speaker, what happened yesterday was not unusual. This is something that was designed by our late president. And I'm saying this with clarity. President Edgar Chagwa Lungu created Tonse because PF was encumbered. PF was in the hands of strangers. PF was in the hands of President Hakainde Hichilema. PF was in the hands of the EPND. So really what President Isio had was this alliance of political parties. The convention with the PF, I want to make it very clear for you to understand.
Yeah.
You would ask me a question to say, why were you going to hold a convention with PF? And yet the matters concerning PF were in court. So President Lungu's version was that for purposes of sanity, for purposes of accountability and transparency, we are going to use the PF constitution
Right.
to hold the convention. So what that meant was the PF structures, as per our constitution, will take us to a convention, elect a leader. That leader was to go and take up the position of chairman and president of Tonse, a position that I hold today.
Right.
Along the way, because of some activities within the PF, the Tonse Council of Leaders decided to strip the Patriotic Front Party of its status as an anchor party and as a party that will provide a presidential candidate. The council resolved that a presidential candidate for Tonse will not necessarily come from the PF,
Right.
but will come from the Council of Leaders out of an election. So if PF was to hold its convention today, the winner of the PF convention today would not be the president of Tonse. If the election or the convention for PF had happened a week earlier, the winner from the PF convention still needed to compete with other leaders in Tonse to become the
Right.
Tonse president.
Right.
Yes, so that must be understood very clearly.
Right.
So Tonse remains a vehicle that President Edgar Chagwa Lungu left. As a leader, I know to say, just in case others created another Tonse,
Yeah.
I can easily tell the difference because I know the other members that President Lungu appointed and left in Tonse.
Right.
So I can't mistake between a real Tonse and a fake Tonse.
So this is
because
it's just a matter of coincidence that you are from PF and you are now the Tonse chairperson.
no, we can't call it a coincidence. The intention of President ECL was that Tonse was going to field a candidate. That was the intention from the beginning.
Right.
So we are carrying out his legacy because Tonse is to produce a unified candidate to go into this year's election. The process through the PF was basically for sanity. Yeah. So, but Tonse came up with its own rules to say, since the candidate is not coming from PF, we will come up with our own rules as Tonse Alliance and choose a leader. And that was done yesterday, very transparently for that matter.
Very transparent for that matter. Let's go to the aspect of your vision for the nation. Is this a question of just having a quest to lead? And I think in my previous interview with you, I had again asked you this. Because it must be embedded in the people's minds as to why you are putting yourself up to lead the nation. What is it that makes you wake up at night and lose sleep and say, I must fix this and I must fix that for Zambia? What is your vision for this country?
Of course, PK vision must be anchored on something. So what we have as a country today, we have a divided nation. That is one. Number two, we have high levels of poverty.
Right.
Poverty levels are very high. So first of all, the vision that I have should contribute to curing these two challenges that are immediately before us.
Right.
Yeah, so on the aspect of unity, PK, this is an emergency. As a country, we're divided. We're so divided. So as a president of the country, I'll prioritize unity of the nation, right? Through the law, through my pronouncements, and indeed engagements. There are laws that are in existence today that could help us cure these divisions that we see today. And Article 259 comes in very handy. especially when it comes to appointments to government positions and civil service generally. Yeah, because this division that I'm talking about goes that far. You're able to see it in government institutions through appointments. So these will be some of the low-hanging fruits because the law already provides for how these appointments should be made, taking into account regional diversity, gender, and youths, as it were. So the president today, a couple of weeks ago, and many a time that he has taken time off his work to go to Southern Province, he has made very alarming statements, where one listening to the president speaking would actually believe that the Zambian people in Lusaka actually rose against people from a particular tribe or a particular region, and give an impression that even buses coming from a certain region were actually attacked by people living in Lusaka. That is not true. I have lived in Lusaka, PK, for over 40 years, and I don't think we've experienced anything like that. If there were such incidences, then it was something that was not common to many people that live or lived in Lusaka. Yeah, so by and large, I believe that the president was deepening the divisions that are already in existence. Where citizens began to, scheme against themselves. One tribe scheming against the other, or people from one region scheming against the other people. So those divisions must come to an end. We want to preach peace. We want to preach that the one Zambia, one nation motto should just not be in word. It should actually be in deed. And it starts with the top. What I said, PK, earlier, like we had a Congress yesterday. The peace that prevailed was because myself and Professor Apostle Pule set the tone. Our supporters had no choice because they saw how we were relating.
Right.
They could not take a different path altogether. So it starts with the top leadership and ends with the top leadership. So if there are divisions today, when there were not such divisions yesterday, we must question the top. So coming to issues of poverty and poverty levels, the vision I have largely involves the youths, PK.
Right.
You know that a greater part of our population is for the youth.
Right.
And these are the people that are mostly affected by these high poverty levels. So the vision I have is to be able to create employment, especially for the youths, because these are agents of change. These are people with the energy. These are people with brilliant and fresh minds to be able to contribute to the development of this country.
Right.
So when we zero in specifically, PK, you will agree with me that research has shown that the real fight against poverty, you've got to create employment to fight poverty. And that employment should be sustainable.
Right.
Youths have been asking me questions. Normally when I appear in the media, they want to know exactly what I have or we have as Tonse for them as youths. I want to take a few minutes, 5 minutes or so, just to explain exactly how I think that the youths will play a key role and how we'll bring the youths in to resolve some of the challenges that they face.
Right.
So when we look at how other countries have resolved challenges affecting the youths, it was discovered that you first of all have to understand what the youths are doing. There are some efforts that they're making already. So you need to get into what they're already doing, something they're already accustomed to,
Right.
and only enhance it. When you drive around PK, just here where we are, near around here, from Mutendere, Kaulonga, right through, you discover that most of our youths are actually doing a lot of metal fabrication. They are also doing carpentry. They also trade in fresh foods, be it vegetables, chicken, meat, and so on. Let's start from there because the idea is to deal with it simplistically. So if we decided today that we wanted to get 2 million youths employed, and we start with what they're already doing, we would go, for instance, in the carpentry industry as government. create factories, maybe even up to 1 kilometer long. Those factories are financed by government because government has got to intervene in most of these solutions. So I don't really subscribe to this doctrine of government having no business in business. That's what has landed us where we are. We have gone to countries where government has had business in business, like China, for instance, and they've resolved most of these challenges. So let's take carpentry, for instance, and you've got a 1 kilometer long factory. This particular factory has got financing on it. You've got CEC providing financing on this mega factory. You've got modern equipment bought by government for and on behalf of the youths. The youths are really coming in there with their raw materials and producing quality products. Zambia Bureau of Standards also finds its place in there to certify and ensure that standardized goods are produced. So what you're doing there, PK, is the backward and forward integration. On one hand, you resolve their problems as regards equipment. You resolve their problems as regards quality control. You resolve their problems as regards market. Because government, by way of policy, can decide to buy all its furniture from these certified factories, whether there's one in Lusaka, one in the Copper Belt, at provincial level, for instance. So that is one way of getting into what the youths are doing already, then getting government involved and resolving the challenges that they have. Because the challenges that they have to do with equipment. Government procures equipment, quality equipment. The challenges that they have to do with training. We've got youth training centers right across the country. So one of the conditions to be able to work in these or occupy space in these mega factories is that you must be able to employ youths who are graduating from these youth centers. And that's the only way you're going to get favor from government in terms of government contracts. So it's all lined up.
Right.
Okay.
So given your passion, towards resolving issues around the youths, and you say you have been asked questions when you appear on media platforms by the youths themselves. What are some of their major frustrations currently? I mean, I recall in 2021, they formed part of the bigger block of voters premised on the, promises that they were given, that Bali was going to fix. Now that they are coming to you, asking you, what are their pain points? What are their frustrations? And what are these things that, are close to their hearts as young people?
Yes, like you rightly put it, PK. That time, Bali promised to fix it. So Bali was providing solutions. He was taking a father figure and say, "I'll do this, I'll do that." My approach is totally different. My approach is that of Big Brother. Big Brother will listen to young brother. Big Brother will listen to young sister. The youths have solutions to their challenges. I've just talked about one, for instance, to do with the industries in metal fabrication and the carpentry, as it were. So the frustrations, first of all, were that promises were made, but not based on anything. Okay, PK, to create employment, you've got to just industrialize. That's the key. Whether it's for the youths or the general population, sustainable jobs can only be created through industrialization. And industrialization can only be achieved through investment. So in this particular case, for the youths, we are saying if we have youths that have got poultry businesses, for instance, most of them are losing out. They're spending the whole day at Soweto market trying to sell their chickens. And because this product is oversupplied, many times they're making losses. The question that is there, can government intervene? The answer is yes, they can. How would they intervene? Government can go into Soweto and set up refrigeration plants right there. set up abattoirs right there, such that the youth would have done his part in terms of keeping the chickens. When he goes to the market, government takes over that burden. Says, can you please bring your chickens here? Put them through this abattoir. Can we freeze them? Now, at that particular point, there's an aggregator who is an off-taker who's saying, if you want to sell in the free market, you can sell it at 150. But in case you have second thoughts, there's a guaranteed market for 130. So you can either speculate or get this guaranteed. That way, the youths, first of all, are encouraged in that the part they will play is that of keeping these chickens. I'll tell you, speaker, you know that Kasumbalesa, there are over 500 trucks going through Kasumbalesa, bringing chickens from Brazil. As the chickens are going to West at Soweto Market, there's 500 trucks that are going through Kasumbalesa border to deliver frozen chicken coming from Brazil. So if we did our part, just on the poultry side alone, CEC can easily come in and grow these small businesses. Because one, you will have an aggregator, you'll have an off-taker who's got fridges, abattoirs, and everything else. So CEC now will look beyond and ensure that this youth who's a poultry farmer and was doing 5,000 chickens every 8 weeks was further supported so that his businesses begins to go up. Most of these, I know this because my children have been doing that, my sons have been doing that. You actually see the challenges in their businesses. So government needs to move in to look at what the youths are already doing and see how best they can assist. We're not only talking about chickens, PK. Let's talk about tomatoes. Let's talk about mangoes. You feel very sad that our youths in agriculture would go there and grow tomatoes, for instance. They're very happy the previous week, where before their produce was ready, a box was at 250. When they go there, it's at 10, a box is at 50. And there's an oversupply at Soweto. You've been there, PK, where you find them throwing tomatoes. They have no use for them and so on.
To do some of these things, very ambitious propositions that you're giving to the Zambian people, you need a very strong industrial backbone and infrastructure that is able to support these. And the Patriotic Front has been known to be that one party that was very focused on infrastructure development. Is it your desire that perhaps Zambian people giving you chance in August to become president of this country? Do you wish to continue on that trajectory of infrastructure development to support that vision you are talking about of making sure that there is across the board industrialization?
Yes, of course. Continuity will be the order of the day. And interestingly, PK, do you know that most of this infrastructure actually exists? The industrial yards at provincial level throughout the country. What is not there now is the political will to ensure that these industrial yards are actually operationalized. So the moment you say government has no business in business, in my view, that's where the problem comes in. Because this particular infrastructure is there. A lot of money was spent on these industrial yards. But then what? Okay? Do the youths have enough money? Do they have enough funding to be able to buy this high-tech equipment, to use to produce whatever they want to produce? So in terms of infrastructure, it's already there at provincial level. Right. So some of these solutions that we're talking about are already sorted out halfway. What is required is now funding. Government intervenes. Government comes in to intervene by providing funding to these particular projects, be it through CEC or any other interventions. I was saying that the setting up of small and medium enterprises ministry was a brilliant idea. I can't take that away from my colleagues. But they needed to plan to the end. Had they planned to the end, they would have also looked at ensuring that there is probably a bank that supports these small and medium enterprises. When you look at the challenges the youths have, small and medium enterprises, it's mostly to do with finance. So that's what needed to be sorted out first. So industrial yards are there. The software is lacking. The software is the political will and the funding to these particular projects. And that's exactly where we say we are going to come in. This also is the same thing with mining, the so-called illegal mining. As opposed to deploying soldiers and heavy equipment to go and drive away these particular youths, you could simply move in and take a record of who are the players, these locals, who are they? Can we take note of them? Whether they're 4,000, they're 5,000, and whatever it is. Take them into incubation. Put them in incubators where you're going to train them on safe mining. You're going to teach them on how to maintain the environment and many other things. When you are doing that, remember, government has to be deliberate. Government should put in money to solve this problem. Okay, get them out there and take them for training. Pay them some allowance as they're being trained so they can sustain themselves. But in the meantime, map out the area, investigate the quantum of the resource that is in that particular area. The time you are giving out licenses, you are already speaking to aggregators to tell them that there's so much gold in that particular area. In the next 3 years, if you brought in this capacity, you'll be harvesting this quantity per month, per year, and so on. So it all plays out. These youths, remember, PK, did not benefit from $100 million that government was spending on surveying for minerals. Government has paid private players millions of dollars to survey and map out the minerals in the country. These youths, on their own, using the ancient methods, discovered the resource. Okay, so let's ensure that they benefit from that particular resource. Because one, they are Zambians. Two, they need to survive. They have no jobs. They have found something. So what government has to do is to be able to convert the informal sector into a formal sector. Those young Zambians can employ 2, 3, 4, 5 on their licenses. They've been trained on how to look after money, how to look after the environment, and how to do safe mining on a resource that they discover themselves. When that is done, the people who are going to secure that particular area are those license holders themselves. You may not need guns to secure that particular area. But most importantly, government to be able to build its gold reserves out of that same gold that is being mined there.
Right. Let's look at another key, economic sector, and that is agriculture. Agriculture has for a while been perhaps second economic stay in Zambia from mining. And you have in the recent past a number of small scale farmers, building capacity to the place where we should be feeling confident to be the food basket of the region. But I feel from where I'm standing, and I'm not sure from you, and this is why I need to throw this question to you. It would appear that there is some frustration that could be creeping in when we look at the government promise to make sure that the farmers are paid in good time. Here we are, close to February, still some farmers haven't been paid. We've seen queues in rural areas, in Choma, here in Chongwe, in Chisamba, different parts of the country, farmers still queuing up in the middle of a rain season, and they were hoping to use their harvest, their money from that harvest to reinvest so that the farming becomes part and parcel of their livelihood. But here we are today. What would be your intervention to make sure that perhaps what's happening does not recur? And if you were to speak to perhaps one of the things that may have led to this particular situation where farmers in February, I mean, today is 29th, 28th. So in 2 days or so, this month is coming to an end, and I can clearly see that perhaps there will still be some farmers who would have not been paid in February. What would be your solution, what would be your advice to the government with regards to addressing this particular key important sector of agriculture, and the ills that peasant farmers, small scale farmers are having to be subjected to?
Yes, PK. It's important to give some background to the agricultural sector so that we appreciate the challenge that we have today. In the run-up to the 2021 elections, President Hakainde Hichilema went and campaigned to the farmers on the basis that he was a farmer himself and he understood farming very well. And many farmers were very happy that now they had their own man going to State House. They turned up in numbers. I know this, that in Northern Province, some of them were actually my cousins coming to me to say, how we kwena munyine fotueleleko now wishwa which wachilamo I 6 bags mutupela abena na abalayo kuti bakulatupela ko 8 bags edyo nga tulefo okushitirapo na umbi twakulashita pali 250 omweba Mundubile n'obuteeko bwene mulishita pali 650. So if kwena okulingana fenefyo tule muno yimulumendo, I think wikachwala bako bwino. So they voted for him. So the first year when they got into government, the yield dipped by about 25%. We had already reached 3.6 million tons that time. They went down to 2.5 million tons, which was about 25% dip. During that time, we already had enough maize in the shades that would last 2 seasons. As government, we had planned to ensure that we're food secure.
Right.
So when our friends came into government, at that time, of course, there was a lot of excitement, having won an election and so on, and they felt there was so much maize. And we actually won them on the floor of the house. There was no need to sell that maize. We're food secure for 2 seasons. We advised them not to sell that maize. That's the only way they could encourage farmers to grow more and be able to secure other markets away from government. They didn't do that. They themselves as government now began to eye the market the farmers were eyeing in Congo. You know, the UPND government is full of businessmen. So they actually prioritize profits. They began to see profits. Food security was no longer an issue. So they rushed into Congo and sold all the maize, 1.5 million tons. That's where the problems started. So we've had challenges building up that buffer stock that would help our farmers, help our citizens in the time of need. So what transpired then was that they tried to recover from that position. So they encouraged farmers to grow more, which they did. And they banned all forms of export. As a result, most of the farmers took their maize to FRA, and by July, most of them had actually supplied this maize. Now, because of lack of planning, like they always say, PK, when you fail to plan, you plan to fail.
Correct.
Yeah. I don't think it should have come as a surprise because the price of maize was known, the quantity they were buying was known. So one, they should have made commitments which were tenable and communicate that to the farmers. So the farmers had a choice whether to supply the maize to government or indeed access other markets. So what government did, they used misinformation. Farmers began to plan upon these payments that were to get from government. Today, when you go around PK, it's a sorry sight. I found this in Kasama. I saw farmers. Some of them were actually collapsing on queues. Had been there for a very long time. They have not been eating. You actually wonder where they access the sanitary facilities, as it were. So it's really a very sorry sight. What is even sad is where ministers go to the press, address the press, assuring those farmers, and a month later, nothing has happened. They've gone to the extent of telling lies, saying the banks are holding on to this money. The last interview we had with you, PK, we called on the Bankers Association of Zambia, to sanction their members for not paying, the owners of the deposits on demand. They came round and said their members would not do that, meaning that government was just telling lies. Government officials, without shame, would go to the media and project the falsehoods, as it were. So the position, PK, is that we have a government that does not prioritize the plight of its locals. A government is there to serve the poorest of the poor, the unsaved, the abandoned, the weak in society. But if government can hold on to the money of this category of citizens for months on ends without considering what challenges they're facing, then it's indeed unfortunate. I want to remind my friends in government today that it's important that they rethink these positions. They've gone round. If they could afford to fly members of parliament on luxurious planes, hired planes, to go and hide them in Lower Zambezi for purposes of coercing them to vote for Bill 7. It means there's some money somewhere that was paid. Even the same friends of theirs who are helping them and aiding them in these corrupt practices could probably lend them some money to pay farmers. I know that they're not short of friends. They are not short of friends. They've got friends in the mining sector. If you ask me, I know that they've got friends in the mining sector. Those friends are enjoying very good policies from them. Why can't they help them in a time of need, in a time like this? This is where friends come in. They should be able to say to their friends, look, we've given you very good policies in mining. These policies are actually against the Zambian people, and they favor you. You've been making abnormal profits. Now we've landed ourselves in a problem. Why don't you help the same farmers who've been deprived, by the same incentives that have been given to them?
Let me pick your mind also on the issue of education. The issue of education is one sector that the UPND administration has said they've performed well in terms of bringing about free education, meals, the feeding programs. They've talked about bursaries. They've talked about all of these good things. Recently, they've launched what is called a competence-based curriculum. They've changed this from grade 10 to Form 1 and all of these things. We had, and I'm asking you this because these are things that you probably be inheriting, and we must sound you up and also get your positioning. We had one of the parents walk into KBN TV to speak to the news team, expressing their frustration about this new curriculum, that wherever they have gone in schools, there's no material to teach, but the curriculum has been launched, and that, as you know, previously A levels were being taught at university, year 1, but the A levels now will be taught at Form 6 as part of this new rearrangement. But there is a concern that has come from parents and other stakeholders that there is no capacity and competence at secondary school to handle that level of preparing the young people before they go into university, because previously secondary schools were not teaching A levels. As president in waiting, again, Zambian people perhaps favoring you and God allowing you to become president of Zambia, inheriting such a problematic education sector, very key to where you would like to take this nation from. What are some of your priorities around these concerns that are coming from the newly launched curriculum and repositioning of the education sector?
Yes, thank you, PK. It's very dangerous, for government to always go to AI and pick whatever they find there and just apply it. There is need to understand these policies completely. You have what is called a regulatory impact assessment. Before implementing a new policy, you actually do what is called a regulatory impact assessment. When you've done that assessment, it will bring out the weaknesses and strengths of the new policies once implemented. It will also guide the policymakers at what point to roll out these particular policies. Had they done that with the new curriculum, I do not think that we're ready to do that. I've gone around, people have come to me to talk about issues of capacity. There are no materials, as it were. So clearly, you have a government that is in a hurry to prove a point. They pick a concept from wherever they did, and they don't they run it through the mill. I know very well because I've been part of government before. There are competent men and women, civil servants, who are at cabinet office today on account of maybe their names. Okay? They are at cabinet office, removed from their offices, and yet these are people who could have assisted government to implement these particular policies. So these particular policies do with curriculum is very dangerous, and I want to appeal to my dear brother Douglas Yakalima to rethink his position. Let him engage the teachers, let him engage the parents, and find out the frustrations that the people are going through. So it's being done in a hurry. First of all, there's no capacity financially from government to be able to supply the requisite materials that to support this curriculum. You know, PK, that most of these schools are receiving their grants, or maybe 25,000 kwacha. Mainly, it's in some cases it's not even delivered. So the schools are already struggling with their regular recurrent costs, even before you bring in new curriculum that requires a lot of materials. So government should not be in a hurry. The government should take its time, go back to the old system, so that we don't lose our learners along the way. We don't produce half-baked learners who are going to have a lot of problems in performing as they go to higher learning institutions, as it were. So this is a problem. It's a problem that has to be dealt with. So when you talk about free education, a very good concept, inherently good. But like I said, you always have to do a RIA, to understand the impacts of implementing a particular policy. Had they fully understood when they were implementing the free education policy, they would have actually discovered, from the demographics, that the infrastructure at hand was not sufficient, to be able to give learning space to the learners. It's not only about space, PK. It's also about teachers. How much workload would one teacher handle? Statistics show that between 35 to 40 learners, so that teachers are effective. A teacher should be able to, by the second week of meeting the pupils, they should be able to remember their names and also understand the strengths and weaknesses of individual learners so that they are assisted along the way. Teachers are trained to do that. Now, if you give them 120 learners, clearly there's a problem. Meaning that, yes, in terms of quantity, we would have achieved. But have we also achieved when it comes to equality? You talk about grants, like I said earlier. Most of the frustration in schools is actually from the funding aspect. The fees, when I was minister, I think the fees were as much as 2,000 kwacha at some point. We reduced them by 1,800 to bring it to 200. That 200 is what the parents were paying to the schools, that we're assisting them to maintain the surroundings, the sanitation and everything else. So when government changed that and replaced it with a blanket 25,000, they again did not do a RIA. There was no impact assessment on that particular decision. Had they done that, maybe they would have come to the conclusion that what the schools actually needed was 180,000 or 200,000 kwacha to be able to carry out their monthly activities. They then would have removed that 200 kwacha from pupils, making it free education, but be able to give the school the 200,000 kwacha that they need, because that's what they will need to get their chalk, their cleaning materials, pay their daily casual workers, and so on. Schools are unable to do that. If you go to the schools randomly, they're actually complaining about that. They're unable to function normally. So the result is that most of the head teachers and teachers in these schools are actually frustrated. But they're the same ones who we expect to impart knowledge in our children, because this is free education and everybody else is happy. So I want to implore my friends in government today, There's need for them to really look at these policies. Let them be very sincere. Go on the ground, interrogate these policies, and see exactly whether there's a positive outcome or indeed a negative outcome.
Talking about education and government having to relook at the things that they are focused on, the Minister of Finance has made, I'm not sure if it's him who has made a startling revelation, and it reminds me of the question of who discovered Mosotunya, whether it was David Livingstone or
The villagers.
the villagers. So the minister has gone to Kasama, Minister Sokotwane has gone to Kasama, and he was fumed at some bush saying, we funded this university, but all I can see is a small, structure that has been erected there. It would appear that it's a startling revelation. It is something that calls for investigation. What could have happened to the funds? The university was needed, called Tumpa University. And that's in your area in Kasama. You probably may be very familiar with this case. Could you enlighten us? What is the history of this particular revelation by the Minister of Finance, that money could have been gobbled, spent, stolen, or siphoned out of the project, that it should have been impacting the lives of our people in the north?
Yes, Speaker. Kasama, there are by-elections going on right now. A number of ministers, senior party officials are actually in Kasama, been in Kasama the past 1 week to campaign for their candidates. What I've observed is that, of course, the ground in Kasama has not been very friendly to our friends in government on account of the many failures that they've registered in this period they've been in government. What we have seen, we saw senior government officials resorting to other methods of wanting to disparage the government, the previous government, as it were. The statement by Comrade Musokotwane is worrying. It's worrying, especially that Comrade Musokotwane and Honorable Milupi come from the same cabinet. When you go to Parliament and find out what the response from Honorable Milupi was concerning that particular project with what Honorable Musokotwane is saying, then as a Zambian, you must be very worried. People coming from the same cabinet, giving two different positions. Comrade Milupi, as Minister of Infrastructure, cleared all those stories surrounding Ntumpa University and Wapula University. And yet, 2 years later, Comrade Musokotwane can actually go there and make some very frivolous statements, statements that should alarm the nation about misuse of funds.
What's the real story there?
Well, the real story is that there was some Chinese funding of about $200 million, which was dedicated to FTJ University in Wapula. And during my time as minister, we had received a request from the bishop, Bishop of Kasama, Archbishop of Kasama, Bishop Ignatius Chama. He asked me and Honorable Mutati, who was the finance minister then, to consider building a university in Northern Province. We had gone to pay courtesy call on him. So as a very active minister at the time, I swung into action to try and see how best we can get university going. So the bishop had also suggested there was a brand new school in an area called Ntumpa. It had been completed, but not yet commissioned. So he actually suggested, why don't you just convert that into a university? I invited the minister of higher education then, Professor Nkanduluo, to come and look at that possibility. So when she came, she discovered that this school was very nice and she didn't want to disturb it as a secondary school. She then remembered that there was $200 million put to one university in Wapula. She actually said it was within her power and the ministry and cabinet to agree that that can be split between two universities, one in Ntumpa and one at FTJ. So that's how that decision was made. So there was a Chinese contractor. The same contractor in Wapula was a contractor in Northern Province. These contractors were strictly paid by the Chinese government. The only part the Zambian engineers had to do was to certify the works, as it were. So according to the answer that was given by the Minister of Infrastructure on the floor of the House, the contractors had been paid for the designs and mobilization. So They went on the ground to find out whether the designs were there. The designs were there. Whether the contractor had mobilized, the contractor had mobilized on both sides. In the case of Luapula, the contractor actually started the actual works. So in the final certificate at termination, government actually owes that contractor money because he had done some work for which they had not paid. So this was a question on the floor of the House. But PK, you also remember that our young man PK, Innocent Piri, IP, had taken it upon himself. He went to Luapula to do this investigation. There's a full documentary. And the consultant in that particular project took the interview and gave clarity, which was very similar to what the minister said. Now, for a cabinet minister of many years, in both in government and parliament, in the name of Tumbeko Msokotwane, to go and make those statements, I think was very funny. I know that campaigns are heated up. He didn't have it easy in Kasama when he was campaigning. But there's a way, as a senior politician, you handle difficult campaigns. You don't go about bringing about things that would later embarrass you.
Earlier, you
very, I felt bad.
Well,
that's our senior.
He
would have managed that situation better. Really.
We'll see how that goes, because after the minister made that disclosure, there was a press statement that followed that government would take keen interest and deploy investigative agencies. So it would be nice to see.
They should just use that money to pay farmers. The reports are there. Let them go to Parliament. Go to Parliament website and look at the answer. Find out what Comrade Milupi said regarding that particular project. The answers are all there. So I think they can save that money and pay some farmers, really. There will be no need for them to waste that money to go and go on. There's nothing they'll go and do on the ground.
Yeah. So earlier you talked about illegal mining. This has become now a buzzword, illegal mining. Previously it was Jerabos. Now we have gold miners, and they're coming from everywhere. Last week we saw the deployment of special forces to go and remove the so-called illegal miners from northwestern Kikonge gold mine, to be very specific. We do not know now who is there and who will be mining. Again, you are campaigning to become president of Zambia, and mining will remain our economic mainstay for many years to come. And obviously, I would like to assume it is top of on your agenda. What information do you have on the gold illegal mining? What is the current government policy? Has the normal processes failed that we should now be deploying special forces? Where are we getting it wrong as a country? What should be done around the sprouting of gold mining, and how can it actually benefit the nation?
Yes, I'll answer that question, PK, by first defining corruption, the broader definition of corruption, which is not the mere giving or receiving of bribes, but involves decisions that are made in private interest instead of public interest. And this will come by way of legislation, administration, and indeed policy. So that being the case, if we take an isolated case like the Kikonge and try to see whether it sits within the definition of this broadened corruption, we must first of all find out. President Hakainde Hichilema promised the youths, he said, when I come into power, there will be no illegal miners. We'll call you small-scale mines. Okay, what exactly has he done? He actually signed a social contract, PK. There was a social contract that President Hakainde Hichilema signed. So if you look at the situation in Kikonge, and you look at the decisions that are being made, are they being made in public interest? In this case, in the interest of those youths, men and women at Kikonge, or private interest? We've seen similar maneuvers happen before, where some big player, some big investor with a deep pocket comes around, and government officers and officials make decisions to disadvantage their own citizens. So my prayer is that the situation at Kikonge will not result in a situation where tomorrow we are told we have found a very big investor who is coming to invest in Kikonge. Because then that would be total corruption. Government would have acted in favor of private interest against public interest. They would have used government policy, they would have used administration, or in some cases even used legislation to favor the decisions that are going to make.
Right.
Yeah, so government has failed insofar as small-scale mines are concerned. What they said they would do and what they have done, predominantly nothing, shows that they failed in that particular sector.
Right.
I remember government coming up to say they were actually going to train some youths. They were going to give them some training. They're going to give them some capital. They're going to organize some equipment. They organize aggregators to be able to pick up whatever they're producing. If that was the case, this is almost a year ago since they last said that, that problem would have been resolved. Like I said, first of all, to resolve problems of the youths, including those small-scale miners, first of all, get involved in what they're doing. And as government, identify the gap where you should come in and enhance. If the gap is in equipment, come up with some measures to provide equipment to them. Find a big buyer, find an aggregator, an off-taker who should be able to set up in that area, supported by government, and assist these small-scale miners. So the solution to our youths at Kikonge Mine actually resides in the youth themselves. If you ask them, they will tell you what they need from government.
Right.
First of all, they need to be protected. We should be protecting those youths. The presence of the police or the army there should be to protect our youths against foreigners who are coming to that particular area. Those guns should not be pointing at those youths. The guns should be defending those youths and pointing at intruders, foreigners who are coming, to disturb the youths who are mining from their soils, really.
Right.
Yes.
Let's talk about the Kasama mayoral by-election. I think last week you were in Kasama. I want to ask this question from two angles. Number one, what do you think are the main campaign issues that may likely to affect the outcome of the election? What are the people saying on the ground? That's number one. Number two, as at the time we were starting this program, I like to believe that counting was underway. We are not permitted to declare what the outcome would be, but obviously you have people on the ground. What were the initial assessment that you were getting as at the time we were starting this program? So you are speaking to two things. What are the issues on the ground in Kasama? Number two, what are your personal assessments in terms of what might potentially become the outcome of the mayoral by-election in Kasama?
Thank you very much, Pastor. When you go to Kasama, the people of Kasama had one major complaint. All major road projects around Kasama were terminated by the UPND government. You're talking about the Mpika Kasama Road, that was terminated. All the feeder roads within Kasama were terminated. The township, the contracts, the township roads were also terminated. In the surrounding areas, because the voters are also look out. And say Lukakayambi Road project was terminated. The Mporokoso Kawambwa Road was terminated. Mporokoso Nsama Kaputa Road was terminated. Mbala Kasaba Bay Road were terminated. So there is no success story of infrastructure in Northern Province by the UPND. So the people in Kasama and the surrounding areas, because we had a number of our supporters coming into Kasama to campaign, actually delivered the same message. So it was not so much about those two constituencies being occupied by opposition members of parliament. Even in the area where the vice president comes from, the road network is bad. There was a contract for a bituminous road. It was actually terminated. So we were going to the election with the vice president failing to deliver a road to the area where she was actually a member of parliament, where she comes from. We have a member of parliament from Ipendini in Mpulungu. There's no infrastructure project in Mpulungu whatsoever. Imbala is the same story. Senga Hill is the same story. So the issue of infrastructure in Northern Province is very, very serious. Because look, the people of Northern Province are able to watch on TV. They're able to see other projects being worked on. For instance, one such project is the Monzeniko Road. It's actually completed. It was terminated at the same time with the other projects. And the people of Kasama were asking, they were wondering why Nseduka Kayambi road project was terminated when Monzeniko Road, after termination, they were able to give it to another contractor at 3 times the original cost. They wondered why wasn't that money spread out to other areas. Number 2 is the issue of farmers. You go to Zanaco, you go to Indo, and all those banks. We've had farmers sleeping in queues. Farmers have failed to participate in this agriculture season because they have not been paid. The issue of load shedding and the cost of electricity. Many businesses went down. You have a number of people that got loans from CDF, and they started their businesses that was relying on electricity. So they are unlikely to pay back those loans because of the prolonged hours of load shedding. And yet, government, local authority, government is busy chasing for those repayments. These people are very unhappy, and they're unlikely to give a vote to the EPND. They feel that this is punishment. Clearly, you give out loans, you don't provide electricity, and expect these youths, these young businesses, to pay back the loans to you. Today, PK, we were reminding most of our citizens, the cost of electricity has gone so high. People did not realize that because of load shedding. People only had 3-4 hours of electricity. And in that time, they thought they were paying normal tariffs. Now that they have power 24/7, a lot of households are now crying. But look at the plight of that civil servant. That civil servant has had no salary increment. That civil servant can barely afford to pay rentals from what they are getting as a salary. And yet electricity is so expensive. So government is there to solve problems. Now, civil servants are key stakeholders in implementing projects and government policy. So I'm starting with the civil servant because they're nearest. These are key stakeholders to government itself. They're expected to implement government policy. And yet, their conditions of service leave much to be desired. The cost of living is going up, cost of electricity, cost of rentals, cost of fuel, and yet their conditions remain static. So those are some of the issues that are coming out, of the people in that part of the country, as it were.
Would you think that this is unique to Northern and Kasama only? Do you reckon that perhaps maybe the complaints could be different in other parts? Maybe Zambia is doing better in one corner than what you have just explained in terms of your experience. You were on the ground. Maybe that is very exclusive to the issue of Kasama.
No, not at all. It's not exclusive. It's that is countrywide. Like I've said this and I'll say it again. Government, the development of projects in government should be structured. It should be based on a national development plan. The moment you have no national development plan, you wake up to realize that you only took development to one side of the country, which is what the case is now. PK, if you remember, when we were in government, each minister, the starting point from making statements was the 7th National Development Plan, because our development was structured and based on the 5 pillars of the 7th National Development Plan. Today, not even the Minister of Finance refers to the 8th National Development Plan, which is a successor plan to the plan that we use to implement these projects. So if you look at how structured we were in terms of delivering development, it was not magic, PK. It was because it was based on a development plan. You found that if we're doing new districts, infrastructure was consistent right across the country. If we're rolling out infrastructure in the health sector, it was consistent right across the country. If we're rolling out schools in the education sector, it was uniform right across the country because it was structured. And now, because it was structured, based on the National Planning and Budgeting Act, we actually had what we called an investment board. So when you are rolling out projects, this investment board looked at other supporting projects. We want to take a school there at Intumpa. Is there a tower? Is there electricity? Is there a road? So that the projects that will be presented by Ministry of Infrastructure will actually be realigned to areas where we've already invested so that we don't throw money all over the shore. So what has happened under the EPND government? Because one, they actually have no recourse to the National Budget and Planning Act. If that was the case, then you would have seen some structured implementation of projects. The budgets, there's been 5 budgets so far. The budget do not speak to the 8th National Development Plan. And yet the law is very specific. The act is very clear that a budget should be crafted and formulated from the National Development Plan. So most of these areas have been affected, PK, because development has been more like a knee-jerk reaction. If my dear brother, Comrade Milupi, goes through a bumpy road between Tatayoyo and the Katunda Junction, was going to his constituents, says, this road is not good. And then they move a contractor there. If he's coming through Mwinilunga Road and it has a puncture, he says, no, we have to do a road. Development should not be like that. Development should be planned and structured. So this is the reason why there's no consistency. You can't see any structure in the manner that the development has been.
Let me take you back before we wind up. Let me take you back to, you listed a number of roads whose contractors, were made to stop, or the contracts were terminated.
Yes.
Was there any justifiable reason as to why? And this is nearly 5 years down the line, and there's still no contractor back on site. What was the convincing reason why those contracts were terminated in the first place?
Well, initially our suspicion was that it was political, but then later you realize that the contractors that they're using now, the same Chinese contractors, were the same contractors on the Mpika Kasama Road. These were the same contractors on the Mprokoso Nsama Kaputa Road. So you really wonder what this was all about. So the people of Northern Province, the people of Muchinga, the people of Luapula, the people of Eastern Province, you know very well that the Chipata Lundazi Road, the Lumezi Lundazi Road, the Lundazi Chama Road, these are roads that were started many years ago by President Sata, and some progress had been made. There's no, Comrade Milupi always talked about Chama Lundazi, Chipata Lundazi, but go there today. Nothing has happened. Nothing is happening. So the complaints in Northern Province are the same complaints my dear cousins in Eastern Province have. At one point, the minister was heard saying that was an economic road. Now imagine, Pastor, if the policy of PF was that of making profits, like our friends at the EPND today, or if the policies were that we only focused on economic roads, we would not have a road like Mansa Luwingu. So when you talk about economic roads, PK, it's actually holding a very limited view, because what we have potential in many sectors across the provinces. So let's say the potential lies in Luapula. By connecting a road through Lumezi, Lundazi, and Chama into Luapula, the target was the investments that is in Luapula. But the people in Eastern Province coming from Mozambique and Malawi needed to easily access that. So you can't isolate a project to say this is 120 kilometers in this particular area. There's no activity. It's about connectivity. The idea there should be about connectivity and the opening up strategy of opening the country so that ultimately even a potential potential areas in energy, potential areas in tourism, in agriculture that may lie beyond the stretch of that particular road can easily be accessed through that connectivity, as it were.
I need to pick your mind on this. There's a huge celebration in the country, particularly in government circles, that finally we have landed. We've reduced inflation to a single digit, 9.4%. But there are sentiments from other members of the public who are saying, what is a single inflation digit when I cannot buy Mili Meal as was promised? What are your thoughts around this huge celebration, which is a major milestone to reduce inflation, but the cost of living is still up there?
Yeah, maybe before I tackle that, I'll remind you, the UPND are in the habit of hosting celebrations. Do you remember the time that Comrade Musokotwane was coming from the US or wherever that was, assembled teachers at the airport to come and celebrate debt restructuring? The teachers were drawn from all the schools in Lusaka and they were lined up there to celebrate debt restructuring. And everybody else, the layman on the street, thought, oh, this is it. They would actually quote it, debt restructuring, debt restructuring. What has happened? Has there been any impact on our economy? Has there been any impact? The Zambians are still suffering the same way, even worse. So when you talk about inflation, you're basically talking about the rate at which prices of goods and services increase. So they're talking about having reduced it to 9%. Yes, but what's the impact on the ground, really? So these are figures that they keep celebrating day in, day out. They'll celebrate that the reserves are now at $5 billion, but the farmers are not paid. You see, PK, you need a government that cares for the people. Under Tonse, we will run a government that cares for the people. For us, it starts with Nakulumutinta Pankasa. If there is 5 billion in reserves, how has that impacted the life of Nakulumutinta Pankasa? Is there money to do the roads that to make it easy for the government to deliver fertilizers closest to a depot that is near Nakulumutinta Pankasa? Will there be money in the budget given to the Ministry of Health to build hospitals so that Nakulumutinta Pankasa can walk to the hospital? Is there money for schools so that a school can be built near Nakulumutinta's home, as it were? Then we can celebrate. But if we're going to celebrate figures in a vacuum without understanding exactly how they impact on our people, that is not the way Tonse is going to proceed. So Tonse will have people in mind. If we're talking about inflation, we'll have Nakulumutinta Pankasa in mind and find out how the drop in inflation has impacted on the life of Nakulumutinta Pankasa. The 5 billion reserve, how has it impacted? The investment in the mining sector, oh, we are going to start producing 3 million tons of copper. How will that production help or impact the life of Nakulumutinta Pankasa? Oh, there's been so much investment in the mines this year. There's 1.2 billion. There's $2 billion. We quickly rush to Nakulumutinta and find out whether the investments in the mining sector have actually had an impact on the life of this ordinary Zambian.
How do you rate your chances of winning the 2026 presidential and general elections?
The chances are very high. The Zambian people already decided. You've had this conversation. The Zambian people already decided that the UPND is going, they'll be removed from power. They've been waiting to see who they're going to vote for. I present myself as a presidential candidate under Tonse. I'll continue to speak. Like I've said, the basis upon which we'll go to see our people is that it will be about the Zambians and the Zambian people. The message is very clear. As Tonse, we care for the people. We'll talk about the people, we'll not talk about inflation. We'll talk about the reduction in poverty levels. How many people have been saved, out of poverty. We'll not talk about what we have in our reserves. We'll talk about how many kilometers of road we have done under feeder roads. We'll talk about how many extra schools that we have built. We'll talk about how many factories and how many youths we have employed as a result of certain measures. That will be the difference. Whilst the EPND celebrates figures in inflation and many other macro fundamental numbers, we will be reporting on the actual impact. What a measure that was taken under youth employment creation. How many youths have been employed? How many women have been employed? You know, and exactly to what level they've reduced the poverty levels. So whereas our friends do not have the people in mind, we will have people in mind and will be reporting numbers of the people that would have benefited from our policies and not reporting numbers in a vacuum.
Tonse Alliance presidential candidate, Honorable Bran Mundubile, making an appearance on State of the Nation. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
We can only wish you all the best.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
There you are, dear viewers.